acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, June 29th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Mark Joseph Stern, senior writer at Slate. On the crumbling wall between church and state in this country, just another one of the new features of our current Supreme Court. Then Matt Stoller, director of research at the American Economic Liberties Project, author of the big newsletter on SubStack, on some good news that's happening at the Federal Trade Commission. Also on the program today, January 6th testimony from Mark Meadows, lieutenant, ties the armed surrectionist to Trump and the White House. Meanwhile, Ginny Thomas reverses, now says she won't voluntarily testify to the January 6th commission. Primary results in 1 for 3 with the Illinois progressives. New poll, confidence in the Supreme Court collapses as 33%, only 33% agree with their Roe v. Wade decision. Supreme Court backs a lower court, blocks a lower court's ruling that ultimately will allow Louisiana redistricts to disenfranchise black voters. Turkey drops its veto of Sweden and Finland joining NATO as Russia continues to strike civilians. And women around the country are denied all sorts of health care in the wake of those triggered abortion bans. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are back and back in studio. Emma Vigeland.
Hello.
How
I
are
am
you?
back. I am well. I am doing well. I went on vacation.
Yep. And
I saw a baby. My cousin has a new baby. And I've
got a
decided...
little bit of a Wally Pipp situation.
Yeah.
Do you know who that is?
No.
You don't know who Wally Pipp is?
No.
Maybe you might want to Google that.
Well,
he was who Lou Gehrig replaced.
That's correct. Wally Pipp got sick. Lou Gehrig comes in. Boom, boom, boom.
I
don't know
not
if you
have...
heard who was on the mic yesterday.
I...
So wait a second. So do we not get the full headlines on the stream?
I'm not quite sure when
Okay.
we
need to check that in the future.
But point being, I saw a baby, and now I realize that everyone here, baby killers.
Oh, well, that's great. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I,
That's,
new dynamic for the show.
This is the beginning of my turn to leave the left. I saw a baby and realized that we have to protect all babies,
that the
born
first-
and unborn.
it's the first time you've seen a baby.
First time, and I realized that maybe our stance on killing babies at this show should be reevaluated.
All right. All right. Well, I'm willing to look into that.
Gonna take a quick break, folks. Take Em off the show.
Yes. And then she goes off to huge success.
Blaze TV. Yeah.
Yes,
Exactly.
I'm going to make $3 million
New show on
next
Callin.
year.
She's got a new show on Callin and on Rumble. Is Rumble still around?
I haven't heard. There's locals now, but I don't know about Rumble.
Is Rumble still
There's
out there?
Rockfin. We didn't make any money off that, but
Had a chance to catch up with the testimony yesterday, at least the Hutchinson testimony. I don't think there was any other testimony yesterday. And there is some controversy around it because two Secret Service men who had relayed to Hutchinson a story about Trump's fervent attempts to get to the Capitol on January 6th. Supposedly, unnamed sources say they are now claiming not to have said that to Hutchinson. There were only 2 people in the car, or 3 people in the car, is my understanding. There may have been more, but I think there was only 3. That was Trump and these 2 Secret Service people. Now, Secret Service guys, they don't want to come out and I don't know what this is. What's this? Okay. This is okay. All right. Secret Service guys are not really supposed to talk about what happens on their detail. They don't want this to get out. It's not hard to imagine that 2 guys who were a little bit loose with their lips, as it were, are a little concerned about that getting out there. They supposedly are willing to testify. It'll be interesting to see if they will testify under oath. Nevertheless, there was a lot of things that Hutchinson said that has been confirmed and not refuted. Here is Liz Cheney interviewing the former assistant to Mark Meadows, Cassidy Hutchinson, on Donald Trump, what he said when he was told that some rallygoers could not get into the area that he wanted because there were roving, essentially metal detectors that kept people from bringing weapons into the area. So in other words, a lot of weapons were confiscated. A lot of people decided not to go into that area and to stay outside the perimeter because ostensibly they didn't want the weapons.
Which was something that Trump took umbrage with because he wanted the crowd to be as big as possible.
And maybe also he didn't want people to be without their weapons. Right. Here is what he said to longtime Republican operative. She's only in her late 20s, but she had worked for Steve Scalise and others on the Hill.
Ted Cruz. So she's a die-in-the-wool Republican. Yeah.
No, I don't know what this is. I don't.
These are the texts that are describing what you said. Between Cassidy Hutchinson, she says the crowd looks good from this vantage point. As long as we get the shot, he was fucking furious.
This is clip number 1, right?
Yes.
Okay. Where is the testimony from Hutchinson?
It's just right after this.
Okay, play it.
Yes. And the text messages also stress that President Trump kept mentioning the OTR and off-the-record movement. We're going to come back and ask you about that in a minute. But could you tell us, first of all, who it is in the text who was furious?
The he in that text that I was referring to was the president.
And why was he furious, Ms. Hutchinson?
He was furious because he wanted the arena that we had on the ellipse to be maxed out at capacity for all attendees. The advance team had relayed to him that the mags were free-flowing. Everybody who wanted to come in had already come in, but he still was angry about the extra space and wanted more people to come in.
And did you go to the rally in the presidential motorcade?
I was there, yes, in the motorcade.
And were you backstage with the president and other members of his staff and family?
I was.
And you told us, Ms. Hutchinson, about particular comments that you heard while you were in the tent area.
When we were in the offstage announce area tent behind the stage, he was very concerned about the shot, meaning the photograph that we would get, because the rally space wasn't full. One of the reasons, which I previously stated, was because he wanted it to be full and for people to not feel excluded because they'd come far to watch him at the rally. And he felt the mags were at fault for not letting everybody in. But another leading reason, and likely the primary reason, is because he wanted it full and he was angry that we weren't letting people through the mags with weapons, what the Secret Service deems as weapons and our weapons.
Okay, do we have the YouTube stream? Is that up? I'm getting now text saying it's down. So here's Donald Trump saying he doesn't care who has the weapons. They're not going to hurt him. And it's just more indicative of his awareness of what was going on in terms of the Capitol.
Yeah, and she testified a bunch of other things, like about Rudy Giuliani saying January 6th is going to be, quote, a great day.
We'll get to the other clips later in the program.
Okay.
We got to get through this now. We have sponsors, and then we'll get to Mark Joseph Stern in just a moment. I have a special guest in the studio again today who reiterated that his favorite Magic Spoon cereal in the morning. Yeah, you're not coming on. I'm going to relate it to you. Were you changing your suggestion as to what the... okay. Cookies and cream. It's one of my favorites with my kids. I am, of course, a cinnamon guy, but we're all trying to eat better. Healthy breakfast doesn't have to be boring. Magic Spoon has the amazing flavors you love, but without all the bad stuff. It's also good as a midnight snack. So I try and get to sleep at night. I have now been enjoying Magic Spoon for, I don't know, I feel like 4 years. And it is, it's awesome to have something that tastes so good and has no sugar and garbage. And it's also nice to be able to feed that to our children.
You don't want to feed your children garbage.
No, I don't. Sometimes that's what they want, but they enjoy the Magic Spoon. Most Magic Spoon flavors, besides Honey Nut, have 0 grams of sugar. Honey Nut has only 1. There's only also 13 to 14 grams of protein, only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. Plus, there's only 140 calories per serving. Magic Spoon is keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb. You can build your own box. They have 9 available flavors, and you can customize your bundle. Cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, cookies and cream, maple waffle, blueberry muffin, cinnamon roll, and honey nut. And even more exciting, Magic Spoon just brought back their cereal bars. They were so popular, they even brought them back permanently. It's the perfect, convenient, on-the-go companion for your cereal. Go to magicspoon.com/Majority Report, grab a custom bundle of cereal. Be sure to use our promo code Majority Report at checkout to save $5 off your order. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/Majority Report. Use the code Majority Report to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode. We're going to take a quick break. And, I should also say, Just Coffee mistakenly yesterday said that it was ending yesterday. It is not. You still have 2 more days, including this one, to get 25% off at justcoffee.coop. All you got to do, use coupon code MR25, 25%. Great time to try their different varieties of coffee. Dark roast, medium roast, light roast. They have all sorts of sources for their coffee. They're employee-owned. Great company. JustCoffee.coop. 25% off for 2 more days. MR25. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with Mark Joseph Stern. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Joining us, Mark Joseph Stern, journalist or senior writer, I should say, at Slate. Mark, here, Emma Vigeland. So a couple of cases dropped today, but also yesterday. We've had obviously a lot of things that have happened in the couple of days since we've spoken to you last. There are two cases I want to start with because they both have to do with the separation between church and state, which seems to be, quickly becoming a relic from a bygone era. Let's start. I don't know. We might do them chronologically. Let's start with Carson v. Macon. This is a case out of Maine. Tell us about this.
So this case involves a unique feature of Maine's education system, but there is nothing about the holding that limits it to Maine. So Maine is a pretty big state with lots of rural areas where the state cannot afford to build or run public schools. So in those regions, it instead gives money to families to spend at private schools that the state intends to function as substitutes for public schools. So it has these requirements that private schools have certain curricula to receive this money, that they have to teach these subjects, and that they cannot be overtly religious. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be affiliated with religion. Lutherans can set up a school and it can be formally affiliated with Lutheranism, but the actual curriculum has to be secular because, again, these are supposed to be stand-ins for public education in places where it's just not possible. And in Carson, the Supreme Court struck down the requirement under state law that schools must be secular in order to receive this money, and said that it is a discrimination in violation of the First Amendment's free exercise clause for Maine to attempt to preserve the separation of church and state by refusing to spend taxpayer dollars sending children to overtly religious private schools that do not just educate them, but indoctrinate them with explicit Christian values.
And would also, those schools could also theoretically, and very often do, we're not going to have gay teachers. We're not going to, it would be a bit of a throwback, but we're also only going to have white teachers. We're not going to, there could be a whole host of things that their, religious doctrines, would be discriminatory based upon any other sort of, any other, context.
Yes, and also these schools that are now set to receive money also discriminate against religious minorities. So they teach students, for instance, that Islam is an evil and untrue religion that violates the tenets of Christianity. They do not accept Jewish kids. They do not accept Hindu kids. They discriminate against the children of same-sex couples, even if those kids are straight. They are, in all the ways that are possible, extremely discriminatory and bigoted, frankly, against the very public that they are supposed to be serving by standing in for Maine's public education system.
Does it also inhibit the ability of Maine to set specific standards in terms of what they're taught? Because, I know, just for an example, there are yeshivas in parts of Brooklyn, religious schools where, they're not necessarily taught a lot of things that you need in terms of math and science. I imagine there are also some Christian fundamental schools. There could be other, I'm not familiar necessarily with Muslim fundamental schools where creationism has as much time on the curriculum, if not more, than the idea of like biology or, other sciences. Where does the imposition, can Maine still maintain certain curriculum requirements?
So I think that's the right question to ask, along with whether Maine can even require secular teaching in public schools. And, the answer is whatever 5 justices want it to be. I think the logical implication of this decision is that the answer is no, because the court essentially holds that states do not have a compelling or important or even legitimate interest in maintaining secular systems of public education. The court equates secularism with anti-religious discrimination and says that under the Free Exercise Clause, it is discriminatory for states to mandate that schools be teaching only civic education or secular education, and that to gag schools from teaching religious education is, again, unconstitutional. Now, the holding in this case only applies to private schools. And so I think in your example, the answer would be that New York cannot force yeshivas to teach secular education, that states cannot require private schools to maintain certain curricula that adhere to basic standards. And then the next question becomes, well, what about in public schools? And this touches on the next case we'll discuss, but can a state say you're not allowed to indoctrinate students with religion? You're not allowed to express overt religious ideology in the classroom? Again, I think the answer under this decision is no. And the real question is, how far are Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts willing to go in eroding the secular foundations of our public school system?
And just to clarify, what I meant by with Maine is that you don't get these funds. You're not eligible for these funds, because this is a function of Maine having this unique or supposedly unique dynamic where they subcontract to private schools public school education because they don't have the facilities there. But they do have requirements as to what those private schools must teach in terms of curriculum, because, to be eligible for that funds. Can they impose that same standards on religious schools, or would that be problematic?
I think it would clearly be problematic under this ruling. Again,
okay.
I think the only way a state can impose those standards is if it has a strong interest in doing so. That the state needs to be able to articulate some kind of reason why it is imposing these curricula standards. And the decision in Carson says that secularism is off the table, that, say, teaching real science rather than creationism is presumably off the table as a strong state interest, because, again, the court deems that to be discriminatory against religion. So, every state does this a little differently, but the upshot of Carson is that courts are going to assume that any kind of secular requirements are unconstitutional unless the Supreme Court says otherwise.
Okay, so I have one other question. So Maine does this thing where they subcontract it out, but doesn't ostensibly that's somewhat unique because it's such a rural state.
Right.
But my understanding is, or I have specific knowledge of this, that if I have a student in a public school that has a specific learning challenge, and the public school, I can show that the public school does not have the sufficient resources to teach my child because of their challenges, the school system is obligated to fund my child attending a special school. Maybe they're severely dyslexic. I don't, without getting into the specifics of what, but maybe that's the dynamic. Does Carson then hold in that situation where it's not a regular feature of where I'm subcontracting entire school districts to private schools, and therefore can't discriminate between, religious and secular schools. But in this instance, does that then open up some, a yeshiva, for instance, to say, like, we get funding too, because you're giving funding to that school that helps kids with certain other learning challenges. The public school's doing that, and so we get it too.
Absolutely. I have no doubt that under those circumstances, if a religious school were excluded from that program, and they tried to gain access by filing a lawsuit, that this Supreme Court would side with them, and that if the lower courts felt differently, that this Supreme Court would step in. Because again, this Supreme Court has established a rule that discrimination against schools on the basis of religion is impermissible, despite the Establishment Clause, which basically doesn't exist anymore, according to this court. And that, if there is any kind of program that is taking kids out of the mainstream public school system, out of the schools that are actually run directly by the government for most kids, and putting them in any kind of alternate program, whether it's through this weird Maine system or through vouchers or tax credits or scholarships, that religious schools have to be able to compete for those students and accept those students. And anything less is a violation of free exercise. So I think that is, again, the right question to be asking. And in that circumstance, I am certain that a majority of this court would say, yes, the yeshiva has to be able to absorb the students with learning disabilities, even if they aren't going to be providing them with the education that they deserve and would get in a secular alternative program.
Two questions. One, is this going to be an easy conduit for the Supreme Court to target sex education potentially in schools under religious free exercise claims? And secondly, do you perceive them in the way that Thomas does, which is just throwing out these, hey, Republican state legislatures, go after this in this particular area, going after the precedent? Was it Edwards v. I'm blanking on the last part of that. Said teaching creationism in schools is unconstitutional from the 80s. Would that be a way for them to more explicitly go after that that as well?
If you combine Carson with Kennedy v. Bremerton, the other case we'll discuss, then I think you have a clear roadmap for red states to not only roll back things like sex education, but to restore things like creationism, intelligent design, and other overtly religious topics in school. Because, here we have the court saying that secular education, not actually a state interest. States don't have any kind of historical, compelling constitutional reason to insist that its education system remains secular. And then if you look at Kennedy, which we'll talk about soon, the court basically says that schools are free to inject religion into their day-to-day operations, that school officials are free to engage in religious exercise. And unless they literally force students to join them, unless they tell students, you must pray with me, then they are not violating the Establishment Clause. And under that test, I think creationism would absolutely pass.
All right, let's move to Kennedy. This is the case coming out of Washington State, where you had a football coach who, after each game, would go out into the center of the field and start to pray. And depending on whether you want to believe your lying eyes or whether you want to believe Neil Gorsuch, there's some dispute there. But before we get to I don't know if it's best to start with a factual dispute. Let's start with the legal dispute here. Why don't we just start with what is the Lemon test, as it was called?
So the Lemon test, as it's applied by the court up until yesterday, asks whether some kind of government law or action creates the sense to a reasonable observer that there is an endorsement of religion. So if you are a reasonable person and you see some law or some government action and you think that that's either endorsing a particular faith, a particular sect, or endorsing religion over non-religion, then that violates the Establishment Clause, because the fundamental rule of the Establishment Clause has to be government neutrality toward religion and toward religion or non-religion. The government cannot be seen as creating insiders, in-groups who share this official religion that's endorsed by the state, and out-groups of people who are sort of left out in the cold and not a full part of the political community because they don't share the majority religion. That was the Lemon test as applied by the court. That was the rule until this week when the Supreme Court overturned it in the Kennedy case.
There are three aspects of the Lemon test, right? I mean, the way that you assess it.
Yeah, so there are, but really over the last 20 years, the court has boiled them down into this question of endorsement because the Lemon Test, the purpose was the whole idea of the Lemon Test was we want to look at the purpose of laws. We want to look at the effect of laws. We want to look at how entanglement can happen between church and state if these laws are passed. And I think the court did a very good job in more recent cases. Sandra Day O'Connor, this was sort of her mission to boil that down into a more coherent test that just looks at the question of endorsement. Does it look like a law is endorsing religion? Is the purpose of a law to endorse religion? Is this endorsement going to send a message that there are in-groups and out-groups?
Now, and so in this instance, does it turn on the facts? Like, I mean, here's the thing that I find confusing about this, because generally the facts of the case are largely, it seems to me, rarely in dispute by the time you get to the Supreme Court. I mean, the whole point is not that the facts are settled. And then we just make a determination as to what the law says in this instance. I mean, it's or maybe how the law even applies to these facts. But this feels like it turns on the facts in a way that is it's very odd. Isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's odd in the sense that the facts are fundamentally contested and that, as Justice Sotomayor illustrated in her dissent, one side is telling the truth and one side is lying because we have photographic evidence of what actually happened here. And the whole case seemed to turn on this question of, if you look at the photographic evidence, is there endorsement of religion? And if you look at the pictures, there is a coach holding his helmet up high in a prayer circle with a bunch of students in the middle of a field, wearing his uniform, smack dab in the middle of his official duties, expressing thanks to a Christian God.
Let's see. We have pictures of it. So let's put these pictures up. Here is one. Where is the others? I mean, there's the picture of the helmet
in
going
the
up
back
there
with the helmet. Yeah. So if you're sitting in the stands there and you're listening to this guy give thanks to his Christian God, a public school employee in the middle of a football field surrounded by teammates, to me, I think I'm a pretty reasonable observer. That looks like an endorsement of Christianity. And I don't think it's really possible to interpret it as anything else.
Well, I mean, what seems to be even more dramatic is if I'm on that team and I want to play.
Yeah. I
mean, short of me being, the star quarterback, if I'm standing where the person who took that photo is, I'm afraid to show up at practice the next day.
You wouldn't even get to be the star quarterback if that was the guy, right? Like those high school coaches behave like judge, jury, and executioner, and they revel in the power that they get, and he revels in the power that he gets of getting his whole team to do this.
I love that psychological insight, Emma, and I think it's spot on and important
honestly,
to this case. Yes. Because this is the other thing. We're talking about endorsement. There's this even deeper test that it's sort of like the ultimate establishment clause test, which is are state actors, state officials, here the coach, coercing individuals into participating in a religious exercise that they don't support? Is it coercion of religion? That is what James Madison said. The number one thing government can't do is coerce religious exercise. And here it is so obvious that the coach is coercing religious exercise by sending this message to his players. If you do not join me in the prayer circle, you will not be part of the in-group. You will not be getting equal playing time. You will not be favored by me. And in case there were any doubt about this, students submitted testimony that they were ostracized when they refused to participate initially and only joined and kneeled and prayed because they felt that they were being mistreated by the coach and other school officials by refusing to participate. And again, that is the gravest sin under the Establishment Clause that courts had ever identified.
So where does this, this feels like it, because it was always, like a prayer in school, right? I mean, when we articulated, this was always sort of the bedrock of the way that, I would explain to, young children is to What does it mean to separate church and state? Where does this leave us? I mean, when we have all the RFRA stuff that we're anticipating, right? When we have, I don't know what cases we're going to hear next year. You have a better sense of that, but we're not far from a whole host of things that people don't have to participate in ostensibly because of religion. Like, we're expanding what constitutes an infringement upon people in terms of based upon their religion.
Yes. And where I think this leaves us is with almost no constitutional bar against school prayer, because what the court did in this case is hold that Coach Kennedy was in fact protected by the free speech and free exercise clauses of the First Amendment to engage in Christian prayer during the course of his duties at this moment on the field. And what that means is that schools now have a kind of blueprint for restoring Christian prayer. What they can do is say, well, look, we're not officially sponsoring this prayer, but individual teachers are free to engage in whatever religious expression they prefer during the course of their duties, because otherwise we would be violating the First Amendment and violating their rights. And so teachers can now engage in prayer in the classroom, subtly or not so subtly coerce students into joining them. And unless they tell students, you will be expelled if you don't pray to Jesus, there's basically nothing those kids or their parents can do about it.
Yeah, seems bad.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about the facts and how the majority lied about them?
Yeah, I mean, that is, but does there? Okay, let's talk about that, because it seems like if you lie about the facts, it is restricting the breadth of your ruling, right? Like, I mean, if I'm saying that if in Gorsuch world, this is just a coach who quietly moved to the side and right after the game, turned his back on everybody and, got down and kneeled and did whatever he did and prayed to God quietly. It's almost like nobody even realized he was doing it, except for, one, finger wagger, busybody in the corner said, oh, I could tell he's praying. That's the way Gorsuch made it sound like it was happening. It's clearly not. We have the pictures. But doesn't that restrict the scope of his ruling?
So it would be nice to think so. And I certainly think that you could make an argument to that effect. And you just did very, very persuasively. Let me give you the other side of it. The other side of it is that until this decision, the court had said that when you're looking at violations of separation of church and state, you have to take the entire context into account. You can't just look at the one or two instances where the person was nailed for allegedly violating the law. You have to look at their behavior before then, the behavior leading up to the violation, because that is what gives the broader sense of an endorsement of religion. Not just these 3 games where the school district formally reprimanded him, but also, according to Sotomayor, the 50 games before that where the school district didn't know what was going on. And so Gorsuch rejects that, and he just zeroes in on these 3 games where, according to him, the school district took like official action. And so you could argue that that restricts the scope. But what Sotomayor says, and I think this is very compelling, is that is giving violators of the Establishment Clause an easy out, where they can violate the Establishment Clause willy-nilly up until they're figured out. And then once they're identified, once the school realizes what they're doing, then they can kind of go get much narrower, get much subtler about their violations. And if they're punished, they can say, well, I wasn't punished for when I was preaching the gospel of Jesus for 3 years in the classroom. I was only punished for that one day where I had a Bible on my desk and was quietly reading verses to myself. And so I think that by narrowing the realm of violations that courts can actually actually assess. Gorsuch is making it much, much harder for school districts and other government officials to tamp down on Establishment Clause violations by creating this artificial narrowness of the inquiry.
And they also lied as to whether he was fired.
Right. He was not fired.
Bizarre.
He was just canceled.
So,
right?
Yeah, he was a victim of cancel culture. So Gorsuch words this very carefully. He doesn't use the word fired, but he says that the coach lost his job because he was praying, which is basically the same thing and is not at all true. What happened was that the coach was on a year-to-year contract. After he violated the district's rules, he was placed on paid administrative leave. And at the end of his year-long contract, he personally declined to apply for a renewal and then moved to Florida. So he was not in any sense of the word fired.
Okay. Well, it just seems bizarre. Like, have you? I mean, because this isn't like a complicated. Like, I can see how, like, well, you've got the facts wrong. The sequencing of this very complicated, machinations of this, whatever, I don't know, this corporate merger is incorrect. And therefore your holding is this seems to be pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand the difference between he got fired, he got suspended. What's going on with this?
I think that the Supreme Court majority today is in a rush. It really wants to check off a bunch of items on its agenda and in as short a time as possible, because some of those justices still remember when Scalia died, they had all of these big opinions that they had to toss in a drawer and hold off for 2 to 4 years because they lost their 5th vote. And they don't want that to happen now. And I think what Gorsuch and his friends realized was, look, we're not necessarily going to have the votes when the next big school prayer case arises. So even though the facts of this case are not aligned with what we want, where we want to go, even though we have to manipulate the facts to reach the conclusion we want to reach, we can just do it. We've got the votes. We've got the majority. So let's just rewrite the record, just blow past all of these falsehoods that the lawyers below gave us, pretend like this is what actually happened, and then use that new narrative to build law that we like. That's my best explanation for what went on in this case.
All right, let me ask you just one last thing that's a sort of a broader general question. And that is, it feels like the Lemon test is one of a couple of, like, I don't know, principles that the court is in the process of jettisoning, that they are, and you gave us a preview of what we can expect with the EPA test tomorrow, that being the West Virginia, the major questions doctrine. But it feels like the court is sort of like shedding itself. In shedding the precedents, they also need to shed the sort of the tools that have established these precedents. Does that make sense, what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, the court overrules the Lemon test in this case. Gorsuch actually claims that it was already overruled at some point, which is not true. And I think that what's important to remember is that these tests arose because the court felt that it needed to provide a set of rules that everyone could play by, so that everyone was working from the same playbook, and that even if they disagreed about how a particular rule applied in this case, everybody was on the same page about the ground rules. And this court does not want to have those rules constraining its exercise of power. This court does not want to have to run through these tests and doctrines and rules in order to reach its conclusion. It just wants to do whatever it wants as quickly as possible. And this is a theme not just in this Kennedy case, but also in the abortion case, where it tosses out the undue burden standard, in the guns case, where it tosses out this 2-step framework framework that all of the lower courts have been using for ages. And it just says we're making up the rules as we go along and the lower courts will have to catch up. And that really jettisons one of the only real constraints on the Supreme Court's power and gives it a newfound ability to just push off in whatever direction it wants without even having to bother to explain itself.
And it also feels like it's basically saying, look, Fifth Circuit, Eighth Circuit, you guys, we were all sat in the same conference rooms talking, at the Federalist Society meetings. We know what our positions are on this. I mean, this is sort of like, it is there. You don't need to apply some type of litmus test to assess these things. We already know where we want to go. Yeah. And you already know where we want to go. I mean, this is sort of like, it feels like it's turning the court system into the same dynamic that I feel like is modeled, like I see in right-wing talk radio, essentially, or that whole right-wing messaging thing. There's one or two people at the top. You would follow Limbaugh, or maybe you'd follow Hannity, and everything else, all the local radio stations would just basically crib the regional guy would just crib from basically their talking points, and that's it. We don't need you don't need to. There's no mechanism. There's no machine. We don't have to put it through some function to figure out what it is. Inputs are irrelevant. You just tell us the outputs that you want, and that's it.
Yes, but I would just add that the court is also winking to these judges in the lower courts that they should try to push these decisions as far as possible, that they should take these doctrines, these newfound legal principles, to their logical extreme, because that allows the Supreme Court to do this work much faster. It really speeds up the pace of this revolution because the Fifth Circuit is constantly churning out new and ever more radical cases that ask the Supreme Court to push the envelope as far as it'll go.
We're going to have to catch up with you next week. Obviously, the EPA thing is happening. I want to talk about what happened with Louisiana. The court essentially basically chucked, I don't know how they can eviscerate the Voting Rights Act more, but they seem to figure out a new way of doing it almost every case that shows up there. We also want to talk about the tribal sovereignty. But we're going to have to do this next week, and I got a lot of time to digest this court session, which is, I feel, I mean, even before tomorrow, has shaped up to be the most radical shift in American jurisprudence. It feels like you tell me. I
think that it's the most
years.
radical so far, but at the same time, this majority is just getting started and it has so much else in store for us.
Oh, lovely.
Mark Joseph Stern, I guess. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Prophet of Doom.
Appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to Matt Stoller, Director of Research at the American Economic Liberties Project. We got to take our victories where we find them. And if sometimes there may be more like technical things and they exist, but there are some places in our government where some positive things are happening. And he has a good story on that. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. I'd like to welcome back to the program Matt Stoller. He is the Director of Research at the American Economic Liberties Project, author of the newsletter on Substack, Big, which I can't recommend highly enough. Matt, welcome back to the program. I'm here, obviously, with Emma Vigeland.
Hey there, Tiger.
So, Matt, thank you. I'm gonna assume that was Tiger.
That was directed at me.
Oh, was that directed at you?
Yeah.
I thought that was sort of more of a plural.
No,
thing,
no, just me.
So, all right, let's get into this. I wanted to bring you on because I don't know if you've noticed, but there's not a lot of great sort of like positive things to talk about what's happening these days with our government. But there are, it seems to me, sort of like two areas on the broader landscape that are where there are some positive things happening. And particularly in the context of the administration, I would say labor and antitrust. And you, obviously, your beat is antitrust. Let's talk about what's happening at the FTC. You wrote your most recent piece on this was from a week ago, I guess, 2 weeks ago. Corporate bribery just became illegal again. That seems like a positive.
Yeah,
I mean, it's good.
Nothing matters, but okay.
Right.
I can explain that if you want.
Yes, please.
So so a couple of weeks ago, the Federal Trade Commission, which is the body, it's the government agency that polices our markets for unfair conduct. Side note, there's a reason you haven't heard of the FTC for 40 years. That's run by someone named Lena Khan, who is a young, a sort of aggressive academic type who has thought a lot about monopoly power, which is sort of an exciting academic and political area. And what she did, along with actually a unanimous vote, which is important for reasons I'll get into, is that they looked at the insulin market, right? And the insulin market is very messed up because insulin it's been around since 1922, but it's really expensive for a whole variety of reasons. But one of the main reasons is because there's a middleman in the supply chain between when insulin is produced and when insulin gets to a patient that causes the prices of insulin to go way, way up. And it's called a pharmacy benefits manager. And about 50 to 70% of the cost of insulin just goes to that middleman. And that middleman has deals with lots of insurance companies and basically says, if you producer of insulin want to get to the patient, you have to give us a bribe or a rebate. And that rebate has gone up to 50 to 70% of the price of insulin. And we have dominant middleman throughout the economy. Now, as it turns out, there is a law that we have not enforced for 40 years called the Robinson-Patman Act, which prohibits, among other things, corporate bribery. It says that a middleman is not allowed to get paid for anything but services rendered. They're not allowed to get these kickbacks. And what the FTC did is they said, hey, we have this law, and we're going to put out a statement of policy saying that even though we haven't enforced it for a long time, we're going to start enforcing it. And judges and lawyers and class action lawyers and anybody who has authority to bring cases under this law should start doing that. And while they were targeting insulin, because it's a very obvious problem, this is actually a pervasive issue throughout the economy. Corporate bribery is everywhere in our retail markets. It's throughout our healthcare systems. And if you restore the prohibition against kickbacks in supply chains, it could make things a lot more efficient, a lot cheaper. It could create lots of innovation and stop what is essentially going on throughout the economy, which is mass bullying of people who make things or sell things. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that is what the FTC just did. They did some other things that were also interesting, and these things are going to take a while to get through because the legal process takes sometimes months or years. but a lot of good things are kind of going to start happening in the next 6 months to 18 months that have been kicked off by this FTC.
Yeah, and I want to get to those other things. Let me just, and we should just say, folks can go back. I think we've interviewed Lena Khan a couple of times on the program back in 2021 maybe, and in 2018. So just to be clear, how does that dynamic work, the kickbacks? I mean, because when we conceive of kickbacks, it's usually like, I work at a company, I'm going to give you the contract, you put some money into my private account. In this instance, it is that's more of a personal kickback. But how do these PBMs actually sort of extract this money? Is there just no mechanism for an insulin manufacturer to get to? They just have a pure monopoly. There's only like 3 of them, right? Like McKesson and CVS, and there's one other, and they can just basically say, like, you cannot get to the retail outlet, which is the pharmacy, without us, and therefore we're just going to crank it up. Or why does it happen on insulin as opposed to even generics, for that matter?
Well, it does happen in every branded drug, really, and generics is a different problem, which is equally bad, but it's a middleman issue, but it's a slightly different problem. So how does it work? So a PBM is, it's always impossible to describe this business model because it really shouldn't exist. And so you're like trying to explain to somebody why something shouldn't exist, in fact exists. It's basically a spreadsheet. It's a business, they run a spreadsheet of drugs. It's called a formulary. And when a health insurance company has to cover patients, and they say, okay, we need somebody who can like get a list of drugs that we should cover for different conditions and negotiate prices for them, and we'll just hire this specialist who does that. That's called the pharmacy benefits manager. They manage pharmacy benefits, and they put together what's called a formulary, which is a list of drugs. And then what PBMs sort of historically have done is they've gone to the drug makers and they've said, okay, we'll negotiate you because we have a bunch of insurance companies together that are our clients. We have bargaining power, and we'll try to negotiate your price of insulin down, for example. Now, so they should fulfill a reasonable, and then they handle reimbursements to pharmacies, and there's a couple of other administrative things they do, but they're an administrator, and there's nothing wrong with that business model. The problem is that they should get paid by the health insurers or the patients or the pharmacies for reducing prices, but they are allowed to actually get paid by the manufacturers of the drugs, who they should be bargaining with, right? So I'm bargaining with an insulin maker, like saying, Novartis, and I should not be paid by Novartis. That is a clear conflict of interest. However, because the laws are structured the way they are, haven't been enforced, they go to Novartis and they say, hey, if you want to get on the formulary, and there's 2 other companies, you have to give me, I don't want the best price for insulin, I want the highest rebate, right? So there's 3 companies that make branded insulin, right? It's not just a brand generic thing. 3 companies make, and they compete with each other, and Novartis could say, I want the best price in terms and the best quality for our patients, or they could say, I want the highest rebate. And what they do is they say, I want the highest rebate for Novartis, and that's who gets on the formulary. And this does 2 things. First of all, it doesn't reduce prices, right? Because you're trying to get a rebate, and you're not getting the best quality or the best price for the patient. But it also creates an incentive for higher prices, because if you get a 50% rebate on a $100 drug, you get a certain amount of money. If you get a 50% rebate on a $300 drug, you get more money. So the competition is for these rebates, which I called corporate bribes or kickbacks, to the middleman firm. It's not to the executive, but it causes prices. It causes competition for access to the patient, not competition for better pricing. And the reason, I mean, that's a conflict of interest in the business model. The PBMs have also consolidated, so there's only 3 big PBMs at this point. They're also owned by health insurance companies and drugstore chains. So CVS owns both Aetna and they own Caremark, which is a big PBM. United Healthcare owns Optum, which is a big PBM. And so it's these firms are it's a very consolidated industry. Three PBMs control 80% of what patients can get access to. They're also owned by drugstore and insurance companies, which introduces more conflicts of interest in that business model.
And just to be clear, the rebate in this instance is the PBMs are buying ostensibly the insulin and then passing that cost on to the consumer via the pharmacy. And the rebate happens at the sort of, I guess, in between there. It is stunning. I guess, like when we hear rebate, we assume like, oh, okay, I bought this Lantus for $300 and I send in my coupon and I get $50 back. But they're doing it in the almost like in the wholesale level where it's nobody else can see that they're getting that rebate.
Yeah, I mean, there are also wholesalers. So the PBMs don't actually even, this is why I said they're spreadsheet. They don't even touch the product. It's not like they ship the drug, they buy the drugs and then they move the drugs. All they're doing is handling like reimbursement rates for pharmacies and then what gets covered. So it's like purely a set of financial transactions. There are also wholesalers. Wholesalers also use rebates, and that also drives up prices in that case for generics. But the point is that this rebating system, I mean, you call them rebates, but you can also
call kickbacks. They're kickbacks,
right? They're meant to exclude others from the market, right? Because if you can't, the big guy that has a lot of market share, he can just say, well, you have to buy a certain amount from me and you get a higher rebate. And then at a certain point, nobody who's buying is going to ever find it worthwhile to buy from anybody else because then they won't get that rebate. And so then no one else can enter that market. Just even if they had better prices on certain products, the aggregate amount of the rebate from the big guy would exclude them. And that's what you do with like Walmart or a lot of other stores. It's like or Amazon, they extract rebates and they use that system of kickbacks to essentially control entire swaths of the economy.
Well, that was going to be my next question, right? Is how does this affect these major, massive companies like Walmart, which benefited from this for decades? Walmart, Amazon, other huge companies who've been able to skirt by, but when the FTC wasn't enforcing the Robinson-Patman Act.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there was a paper, to give you a sense. So the Robinson-Patman Act was passed in 1936, and it was really passed to address what was the Walmart or Amazon of its day, which is a company called A&P Supermarkets, or A&P at the time. And they used rebates to kill their competition and extract, get better prices for things like cream of wheat or packaged goods than independent stores could. And then they would underprice those independent stores where they were competing. And anyway, so the Robinson-Patman Act said you can't do that. You can't induce price, what's called price discrimination, and you can't get rebate. If you're a middleman, you can't get rebates, unless it's just purely for services rendered. And it worked for a long time, and they stopped enforcing it in the 70s, and lo and behold, that's when discounters and chain stores really took off. That's when Walmart became very powerful from 1970 to 1980. It was like its massive growth period, and in the 1980s and 90s as well, when this law wasn't enforced. Now, Amazon had commissioned two people, the former Republican chair of the FTC and then a Democratic staffer at the FTC. They together, a guy named Tim Meares, they wrote a paper on how Robinson-Patman, the Robinson-Patman Act was a bad idea. It didn't work in the A&P context. And this paper was commissioned by Amazon. So Amazon knows that if you actually start to prohibit price discrimination, they're going to have a lot of problems. And they've been setting up a fight over, make sure to keep Robinson-Patman unenforced for a long time. And what was really quite astonishing about the vote that happened a couple of weeks ago is that it was a 5-0 vote. So the two Republicans who were pretty kind of libertarian, pro-monopoly, very much don't like Robinson-Patman Act type of arrangements, they actually voted for this. And that's a signal to the conservative judiciary and to like that they should take this law seriously, which is a big deal. But Amazon, just to kind of like answer your question, Amazon and Walmart and the Target, the big retailers, like what they do is like if they're buying orange juice, which is a must-have, right, for if you're in a supermarket or bodega, they demand a better price from orange juice from wholesalers than a bodega can get or than a smaller grocer can get. And so the net effect is like grocers will tell you that they actually get or they can buy orange juice cheaper at Walmart. Walmart sells it cheaper to consumers than they can buy at wholesale, right? Because of price discrimination. Because Walmart can just say, if you don't sell us a better price for orange juice, then you don't get access to Walmart customers, and that effectively kills the supplier. So this is a massive problem kind of across the economy. And the FTC, I believe last November, started a study on supply chain constraints, and they sent essentially subpoenas to Walmart and Amazon and Tyson Foods and Procter & Gamble and a bunch of big distributors to try to find out how the terms of trade how they were dealing with supply chain problems, whether they were engaged in forms of price discrimination. And when you have a shortage, of course, price discrimination is not you're going to get better prices. It's Walmart, we get toilet paper before anybody else. And so what you saw during the pandemic is you could go to Walmart and get toilet paper. And if you were trying to go to smaller stores, you couldn't get toilet paper. And it's not that there wasn't enough toilet paper. It's just that Walmart said, if you don't give us toilet paper, we have in our contracts, we will fine you. We can do all sorts of things to you purely because they just have bargaining power. And Robinson-Patman Act was designed to say, you can beat your competition if you have a better service, if you're a better store, if your products are better or cheaper, but you can't beat your competition purely because you are bigger and have more bargaining power. No winning through pure bullying or bribery.
Frankly, they have bargaining power by their size built in already. So this is just like an extra layer to add for them to be able to bully out these smaller stores. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I mean, there are a lot of, they have a lot of advantages from, they have tax concessions and, they get lower borrowing costs. And there's a lot of policy advantages to size. This is a big one. This is like one of the main ones. It's like, if you can't get orange, if your competitor can sell orange juice at the price that you buy orange juice and you're a grocer, like you can't win that. Like you're done.
And this is basically trying to inhibit what is known as monopsony, like a monopoly that is from a buying perspective. That
a buying monopoly, which some annoying nerd had to turn into a complicated word, monopsony.
I was saying it occurred to me that you were studiously avoiding that, and I just wanted to show that I could pronounce it, because it took me it took me 3 years of people saying that word to me for me to be able to pronounce it. And so now that I've mastered it, I want to keep deploying.
Well,
did on the first try.
Yeah, she's the first.
It's the glasses, so that's why you have to,
I have to be able to show that I can pronounce that word. But this is, and we, like I remember at the beginning of, or at one point during COVID, talking to a guy at a bike store, and he was telling me like, there was a certain type of tire he couldn't get, and he's always been able to get this. And his distributor couldn't even get it. And he went on Amazon to see if it was there. And not only was it there, he started playing around to see if he could order like 200 of these tires, some type of special tire, I guess. And he could, and he realized after talking to his distributor that Amazon was basically just saying like, we, to the supplier of bicycle parts, we buy so much from you, we want it all, and you're not giving it to other people. You're not going to, we're going to take it and basically undermine the existence of small bike shops all across the country because we want people to buy all of their bike stuff from us. And if we can corner the market on a couple of key products, they're going to go out of business.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, that's what they do. right? I mean, yeah, that's the whole point of Robinson Patman. I mean, Robinson Patman, there was a whole, there's a long tradition. You go back hundreds of years of protecting small stores, and it's framed as this kind of like, oh, you know, we have like we're nostalgic for these, for, you know, days of yore when, you know, you had the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker. But now it's, you know, now we have these efficient, like clean, technologically sophisticated firms like Walmart and Amazon that are awesome. And, you know, you're just nostalgic, but it's like, in fact, what's really going on is there's just a policy change to allow might make right. Right. That's what happened. It's not that Amazon or Walmart is more or less efficient. I mean, I'm sure they're more efficient than some firms and less efficient than others. But, you know, what's happened is we've allowed them to win by virtue of their size and power. And now you have like what you'll find when you talk to smaller, you know, people who have run smaller stores is that they differentiate their stores by saying like, well, I know my neighborhood better. So I'm going to, you know, there's a lot of, say, Portuguese people who live in my neighborhood, and I'm going to put this weird food that Portuguese people like. And I know what the students in my neighborhood like, and I'm going to put that on the stores. And it's going to be a real neighborhood store that caters to their tastes. And that's you know, there's no efficiency. Like there's no, if you just bring a Walmart in, they're not going to do that, right? Because they're run from Bentonville. And the pricing could be slightly different. But effectively what's happening is, if you can't get certain products, the must-have content, the orange juice, the milk, you know, the butter, those kinds, the eggs, those kinds of things, you can't compete. You can't differentiate your product and create the you know, the neighborhood store that people would like. And that's why throughout America, you've seen this kind of wholesale destruction. You know, anywhere you go, you know, I like thinking about when you take a road trip, right? And you go and you do like, you go to a rest stop. It's like the same. The rest stops all over the country are the same, but it didn't used to be that way. You used to have like, you know, there was regional variation and now there isn't. And that's because we said might makes right. Size is all that matters. And so we destroyed all of this rich, wonderful cultural texture. It has nothing to do with efficiency. It was just, we made that choice 45 years ago and we're living with it today.
And we should say, the cost associated to society is not just, the cultural variety. This is about when a Walmart or an Amazon, Bigfoot's these small businesses, you lose your tax base in a community because when Walmart comes in there, they're making a deal to get a tax break. And so you're losing your tax base in the economy, in your local economy. That implicates your schools, your roads, your services. You're also all of a sudden have this huge player who has an outsized political power in your system. This is how you go from a plutonomy to a plutocracy. I mean, so there is, it starts with what you lose in terms of diversity with the consumer. But the real implications are, you're losing your democracy in some fashion because you're essentially consolidating the wealth and the power in an increasingly small group of hands, and they don't care about the rest of society except for their ability to extract. Let's talk about baseball, because this is also something you wrote about last week. And there's a lot of interest around here about these minor league baseball teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the DOJ, there was a Department of Justice is run by a guy named Jonathan Cantor, who is like Lena Khan. He's a kind of what we call a Brandeisian, so believes that big corporations are dangerous. Generally speaking, not always, but if you're big, it's likely that it's easy to misuse that power. And that's how he understands the law. And so there's a class action lawsuit against the major league teams, because what they've been doing is they've been shutting down minor league teams all over the country. Minor league teams are often like a really wonderful community event. They're sort of like franchises of the major league teams. And so, you'll have a smaller city that has a minor league team, and everybody likes going, but to a major league baseball team, that's just an extra cost. And so they just shut a bunch of them down. And there's a lawsuit against those against Major League Baseball for shutting those down. And one of the reasons they were able to do that, apparently, is that the Major League Baseball has this very weird exemption from antitrust. Just the Supreme Court in 1922 said, I think it was 1920, they said, we really like baseball, so we're just going to give them an antitrust exemption. And the DOJ Antitrust Division filed a statement of interest, which is, basically a way of saying, hey, in a private case, they said, they were like, hey, we're the DOJ, we want to say something about this. And their statement of interest said, we really think that this antitrust exemption should be narrowed because Major League Baseball should not be exempt from antitrust rules, which they are, and use that to undermine minor league baseball teams and communities and the players who play for minor league teams.
And I mean, this is we should say, like, the idea was that our government wanted to promote baseball, and baseball said, like, we need a monopoly, and which means, like, they're the only buyer for minor league players. And so you cannot necessarily establish another minor league team. Nobody's going to play for you if you're not going to get into the majors from there. And they're abusing what they were given without, the consideration of why they were given that monopoly in the first place, which was to promote the national pastime. But how big of when was the last time we saw stuff like this?
Well, I mean, so the other thing is that minor league baseball players are treated just terribly. They're often paid below minimum wage. Their food is pretty substandard. It's like pretty bad to be. And this was not the case. This was not always the case. It's like a relatively new development. What was your question?
Well, when was the last time we saw this type of activity? I mean, from the different sort of, I guess, antitrust agencies that deal with antitrust.
I don't think we've seen anything like this since maybe the 70s, or, you'd probably have to go back to the, you can go back to the pre-1970s, I think would probably be the right way to understand it. I mean, that's when we had a case against AT&T and a case against IBM, which were the two biggest companies in the country. And there was a lot of interesting stuff going on. So it's been 45 plus years since we've had a real attempt to address consolidated corporate power.
Could you foresee, well, because in the case of Major League Baseball with these minor league players who are treated, as Sam mentioned, terribly, or you maybe did, Matt, treated terribly, underpaid, etc. And I think, right now the NFL is in the middle of a controversy, having to testify in front of the oversight committee over sexual misconduct, and basically the only reason they show up is because of their antitrust exemption, which allows them to air on multiple airwaves, regardless of the market, etc. But in terms of the Major League Baseball one, that's particularly, and Bernie Sanders raised this, due to labor rights, mistreating these players and also shutting down these minor league baseball teams as well, and cutting the pay, treating these players horribly. And that's fundamentally a labor issue, right? Could you see this FTC wielding their power in other instances on behalf of workers and laborers, as opposed to, the NLRB has been active as well, but could you see this coming from a multi-pronged approach from the FTC?
Yeah, I think you already are starting to see that kind of approach, both the FTC and the DOJ. The DOJ has brought several criminal cases around wage fixing. So when they brought one against a dialysis company called DaVita, where they said the CEO was trying to prevent his people from his executive team from going to work at other places. And they brought actually a criminal charge against him, and he was acquitted, but it was a major case, and they've done that a couple of times. So, the idea of price fixing, people understand that, a bunch of companies get together and collude to raise the price of something. Well, the analog in labor markets is called wage fixing, which is when a bunch of companies get together and they say, we're going to lower wages, or we're going to agree not to hire each other's employees. And the DOJ is starting to get pretty aggressive in that area. And then the Federal Trade Commission is starting to look at mergers with a labor lens. So they're saying, hey, this merger may not just be about the problem of increasing prices to consumers or changing the way that markets operate so that the product markets are less competitive, or data or whatever. They're also saying, well, will this merger lead to fewer opportunities for people to work, right? Or so are they is the labor market becoming more consolidated? And I think that the Microsoft Activision one is where you've actually seen some of that. So Microsoft is trying to buy Activision, which is an $80 billion video game company. And one of the things that you saw preemptively is that Microsoft said, and it's being reviewed by the FTC right now, they said, we're going to sign a labor neutrality deal with a labor union, I think it was CWA, saying you guys can organize, we won't interfere, you guys can organize Activision if the merger goes through. And that's what you can see, is that they're trying to lobby the FTC by saying, we're going to treat our employees well. And that's new. You haven't seen that before, because the labor monopsony, oh, there we go, I said it, and I don't even wear glasses. The labor buying power issue hasn't really come up. I mean, it started a little bit under the Trump administration. This is not all Lena Khan and Jonathan Cantor coming in. There's been a lot of work, intellectual work, journalism, chronicling how consolidated labor markets are, how there are non-competes, no poach agreements. So this is a kind of longstanding legal trend, and Khan and Cantor are just kind of supercharging it.
Matt Stoller, the Substack is big. You can find that, we'll put a link to it at, you can find it on Substack called Big, but we will put a link to it at majority.fm and in the podcast and YouTube description. Director of Research at the American Liberties Project. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And we will inhibit our use of monopsony, despite the fact that I now can finally say it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. We're going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member today at jointhemajorityreport.com. Don't forget the Just Coffee sale. You can get the Majority Report blend there, or any other coffee. You try them all. MR25, it's a co-op out of Madison, Wisconsin. Check it out, justcoffee.coop. Use the coupon code MR25. Good for a day and a half from now. Probably 36 hours, I would say. And then it reverts back to the 10% off with Majority. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
My co-host David Griscom unfortunately came down with coronavirus, so I will be flying solo tonight.
What? I thought that was over.
Coronavirus?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still going apparently.
What?
Yeah, you can still catch it.
News to us.
And apparently the more you catch it, the worse the long-term symptoms are, so that's just one thing to keep in mind.
Great.
But David, I'm going to be flying solo. We do have an interview with Morgan Levy. She's a Austin Starbucks worker. We talked to her about what inspired her and their situation and how they successfully unionized. So we have that interview for you, and then I'll probably be talking about some Dakota news stories. So patreon.com/leftreckoning, and I'll be going live solo on Twitch too tonight. So twitch.tv/leftreckoning.
646-257-3920. Can't promise we're going to get to a lot of calls today, but that's the phone number. We will be taking IMs. See you in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, and I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now, and I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now, but I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second. Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's
point
go,
there.
Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's.
Stop talking
Oh,
for a
wow.
second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Libertarians. They're so stupid, though. Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
654 $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes to satire.
On top of it all,
Yeah.
my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like
Yeah.
everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half of the Majority Report. The IMs are working. JJ Cool. Hey, Sam, do you think it's appropriate to take away your son's right to free speech on your show simply because you are a slow pooper? Very unlibertarian of you. Mike Wright. Finally, we learned the true reason why Sam went in bed with Big Bidet. 20-minute poops.
Wow, this is really blowing up here.
Southern Socialist praying for David's speedy recovery. Left his best. David 1990. In Sweden, Sam Seder is loved. Thank you. Chris Burdick. Yesterday we get 20-minute poops, and today we get Hey Tiger. This show's become a literal embarrassment of riches. Okay. Assaulty by arguments. The way companies and CEOs act today starts to get awkward in a small city when you live in all live in the same neighborhood. There you go. Fair enough. Let's get into this. We were talking about Casey Hutchinson's testimony. We played the clip up front of Donald Trump basically saying, "Look, I don't care that they have weapons. Let them in." There's a lot of different reasons why he might be interested in that. It could be just his vanity. He wants more people in. He feels like the metal detectors are inhibiting. But he said specifically, they're not here to hurt me.
Yeah. They're just here for Mike.
That's a very psycho thing to say.
It's a psycho thing to say, but that's the other part. Is that this is not, that's the first phrase of a thought. It is not the complete thought.
And then you put it together with what he was saying at the rally about Mike Pence, about how he'll be disappointing me and, basically tacitly threatening him. And you pair that with all of this information, it's a compelling case.
It's a compelling case. The point being, like, he's not shocked that they're bringing weapons, and he knows that they're not here for him, who are they here for? Here is a clip that also made it quite clear that there were people in the White House close to the president who at least had enough awareness of what was going on prior to that rally, that if they participated in what the president wanted to do, that they could be charged with something. Here is Hutchinson talking about a conversation she had with Trump attorney Pat Cipollone on the morning of January 6th.
Who spoke to Mr. Cipollone on the morning of the 6th as you were about to go to the rally on the Ellipse. And Mr. Cipollone said something to you like, make sure the movement to the Capitol does not happen. Is that correct?
That's correct. I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
And do you remember which crimes Mr. Cipollone was concerned with?
In the days leading up to the 6th, we had conversations about potentially obstructing justice or defrauding the electoral count.
I mean, the most important statement there is in the days leading up to January 6th, right? Like, we were sold the idea that this was a spontaneous thing, right? It just got out of hand.
Yeah.
But how does the White House lawyer, Donald Trump's lawyer, have conversations in the days leading up to January 6th that we could be criminally liable for something that is ostensibly spontaneous in the future?
And there seemed to have been a full understanding of the composition of the, what they later tried to deem peaceful protesters. She also testified, Cassidy Hutchinson, that the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys were discussed in the meetings with Rudy Giuliani in the lead up to January 6th. So it wasn't like, oh, what? They just showed, party crashers. No, they were. There
was coordination.
Yeah.
I mean, we played that
we're
clip.
trying to pull.
We played that clip
right?
yesterday because this is.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Well, Giuliani's in the White House.
Yeah.
And if Giuliani is talking to somebody in the White House, he's not talking to Cassidy. She's just overhearing this because she is literally like in between Meadows' office and the Oval Office. And they did a good job in the hearings of actually like physically showing there's like a half a dozen people in this hallway who have offices there, and one of them is hers. And if she's hearing Giuliani bring up to people in that hallway, not literally in the hallway, but in the different offices there, Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. I mean, just want everybody to step back for a moment. They're talking about the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys in the White House. Like,
Yeah.
What? Like, what?
Yeah.
Are those election experts?
I mean,
they're the base. I mean, and like, but I wonder, if this, with all of this going down, Giuliani not being in an official White House capacity, just kind of being Trump's attorney. I wonder if that's a way to just create some separation or plausible deniability.
It's too late because this stuff is happening in the White House. It is happening in the White House. Somebody is coordinating. And what's also clear is, this is clip number 3, that when Hutchinson talks about finding Meadows, just as she's getting information from Secret Service that the rioters were descending and starting to encroach into the Capitol. And remember what's going on here, okay? Put aside everything that we know now, like in Pence's office, where all the staffers are freaking out because they don't want Pence to be convinced by John Eastman, one of the lawyers working on this, that there's a legit set of other fake electors.
Which means
They
he
don't
could
want-
have been convinced. Which means he could have been convinced.
absolutely.
So enough with him being a hero. He
Absolutely.
was on the brink of being convinced to do exactly what Trump wanted.
Absolutely. And you can see like the same dynamic is happening, at least in part, in the White House, where there's some set of staffers who are like, oh, crap. We're all going to be thrown in jail because this is insane what's going on here. And so you have Cipollone was saying again to Hutchinson in that last clip we looked at, don't let the president get to the Capitol. We need to pull back on all of this. And as soon as Trump sends the people down to the Capitol to encroach, and Cassidy gets word of it, she runs to Meadows, who's the chief of staff, and it's her job to keep informed. And Meadows is acting very strange because Trump is now giving a speech, and Meadows does not want to hear from Cassidy. This is bizarre.
Yeah.
Being alone in his office for most of the afternoon, around 2 o'clock to 2:05. Around 2 o'clock to 2:05, you know, we were watching the TV and I could see that the rioters were getting closer and closer to the Capitol. Mark still hadn't popped out of his office or said anything about it. So that's when I went into his office. I saw that he was sitting on his couch, on his cell phone. Same as the morning where he was just kind of scrolling and typing. I said, hey, are you watching the TV, Chief? Because the TV was small and you can see it, but I didn't know if he was really paying attention. I said, are you watching the TV, Chief? He was like, yeah. So the rioters are getting really close. Have you talked to the president? He said, no, he wants to be alone right now. Still looking at his phone. So I started to get frustrated because, you know, I sort of felt like I was watching this is not a great comparison, but a bad car accident that was about to happen where you can't stop it, but you want to be able to do something. And I remember thinking in that moment, Mark needs to snap out of this, and I don't know how to snap him out of this, but he needs to care. And I just remember I blurted out, I said, Mark, do you know where Jim's at right now? And he looked up at me at that point and said, Jim? And I said, Mark, he was on the floor a little while ago giving a floor speech. Did you listen? He said, yeah, it was real good. Did you like it? And I said, yeah. Do you know where he's at right now? And he said, well, no, I haven't heard from him. And I said, you might want to check in with him, Mark. And I remember pointing at the TV and I said, the rioters are getting close. They might get in. And he looked at me and said something to the effect of, all right,
It cuts off, but he says, all right, I'll call him. I'll call Jim Jordan.
There's another clip here too, just to give you a sense of like how upset Meadows with all his friends supposedly in what would appear, if you had no idea what was going on, if you had no idea that this was like a thing that was happening, you might scroll through your phone like that.
The insurrection's happening and he's just like that.
And the president wants to be alone right now. Seems a little weird. But she is trying to, she's just baffled by this guy's reaction. He is acting as if he is not shocked. He does not seem to be shocked.
Of course.
And he is acting in such a way that I mean, how do I not react to this? Here is when she's also here's more. This is when she's talking about him getting a similar response. Here we go.
Mr. Meadows, that people were getting closer to the Capitol and that Capitol Police was having difficulty?
After I had the conversation with Mr. Meadows, after I had the conversation with Mr. Ornato, I went to have the discussion with Mr. Meadows. He was in a secure vehicle at the time making a call. So when I had gone over to the
and just to be
car-
clear, I think this is afterwards. It is, they are getting there and now he's in a secure car because remember they're outside in the
ellipse
in the tent.
Yeah.
And so she hears from a Secret Service, like, oh, they're breaching. And listened.
Mr. Meadows, After I had the conversation with Mr. Ornato, I went to have the discussion with Mr. Meadows. He was in a secure vehicle at the time making a call. So when I had gone over to the car, I went to open the door to let him know, and he had immediately shut it. I don't know who he was speaking with. It wasn't something that he regularly did, especially when I would go over to give him information. So I was a bit taken aback, but I didn't think much of it, and thinking that I would be able to have the conversation with him a few moments later.
And were you able to have that conversation a few moments later?
Probably about 20 to 25 minutes later. There was another period in between where he shut the door again. And then when he finally got out of the vehicle, we had the conversation. But at that point, there was a backlog of information that he should have been made aware of.
And so you opened the door to the control car and Mr. Meadows pulled it shut?
That's correct.
And he did that 2 times?
That's correct.
And when you finally were able to give Mr. Meadows the information about the violence at the Capitol, what was his reaction?
He almost had a lack of reaction. I remember him saying, all right, something to the effect of, how much longer does the president have left in this speech?
So during
I remember leaning against the doorway.
During the speech, so Meadows is not on the phone, let's be clear, with the president.
No.
But he's on the phone with somebody that he doesn't want his closest confidant in his office to know that he's talking to. And she's telling him there are reports that there is violence in the Capitol now. And he is completely unsurprised. Who do you think he was talking to? I mean,
can we subpoena those phone records?
Oh, I imagine that that's already happened. And
are they waiting to drop that?
I mean, I would be surprised. I mean, what was happening during this hearing? Let's be clear. They're setting stuff up. There's a reason why, and they are already planning to have more in July, right? Which starts in 2 days. They needed to sequence this in a certain way. There's a reason why this was not a scheduled hearing until the day before, until she agreed to go public with it. They negotiated with their lawyers, whatever it is. They needed this one now for whatever's coming next. They wanted to set whatever's coming next. So now we have all of these unanswered questions. Why was Mark Meadows not in any way shocked or had no reaction when he heard there was violence? Who was Mark Meadows talking to at that moment when the president is giving a speech and he's talking in a situation where he doesn't want anyone to hear who he's talking to? Why did the president want to get to the Capitol after his speech and so angry about it?
To lead the charge. And I mean, we didn't play this, but another piece of the testimony was when she said that Mark Meadows spoke to the president, said, quote, "You heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong," talking about Trump's characterization of the rioters. He thinks Mike deserves it. So, I mean, the point is just like when he talks about, we mentioned this when we were starting this discussion about wanting the security to pull back on weaponry. I mean, how on checking for weapons and metal detectors. I mean, how can you not make that assumption? And it also seems so coordinated in terms of like, one, Giuliani having some sort of, as I mentioned earlier, attempt at plausible deniability because he's a Trump lawyer, but he's in the White House, has his own office. She calls him Rudy throughout this testimony. Like, they were all working in concert together, but Giuliani doing the dirty work, but Meadows trying to, obscure his role in it as well. It seemed like they all were coordinating and trying to leave as few fingerprints as possible, and it's all unraveling here.
Yep. And, there are two essential sort of strings to this, right? There is, on one hand, you have the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers came to Washington many armed, coordinated, and then there's the White House. And they are slowly starting to join these two narratives that are going on there. And there's really, in many respects, a third narrative, which is the fake electors that are coming into the middle of that. And it feels like it's all being tied together. Where this goes from here, I don't know. But I will say this. There is no doubt in my mind that there is a strong cadre of Republican leadership who is super psyched about this. They want,
I mean, this aid worked for Ted Cruz. Like, she was in the yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you are on Team DeSantis,
yeah,
which increasingly there seems to be a lot of people who are.
Squad.
If you are Mitch McConnell, if you are Kevin McCarthy, who is, there's supposedly some issues that certainly Trump is taking with McCarthy about him not having a Republican on this committee. It's pretty funny. They're using it both ways. There's no cross-examination. And, of course, we also, as defense, defaulted.
Have you seen Mick Mulvaney join in on the?
Oh,
yeah.
You know who's the linchpin maybe in all this is? Okay, go on.
Well, I just want to make the point.
Yeah.
That I am surprised there aren't a lot of people rushing to 4chan right now and accusing DeSantis of being behind this or of accusing the Republican leadership, because one would imagine that would be a narrative that would be building, and certainly it would create havoc amongst Republicans.
GOP anon.
Yeah, I mean, if there was people who were doing that,
deep state DeSantis.
I'm just saying, like, if there were people out there who were going and seeding this narrative in, I don't know, if they had like sock puppets or if they were on 4chan.
Trump's been
neutered. Or on Truth. I mean, I would imagine it would be very, very tempting for a lot of people to start seeding this narrative. And on locals, on if you're on like on Rumble, comment sections. I mean, on Truth Social, but also even on Twitter, but on 4chan. And on Facebook, I mean, because it's quite clear that they're pretty psyched about this. And
knives are out.
The knives are out. So I'd be surprised if there weren't people who weren't going out and doing this type of thing, creating these narratives to wreak havoc, because it would be very confusing for people who are both trying to discount the testimony that we're hearing and also who want to carry on the conservative project to have to be fighting with each other. That would be very difficult for the Republicans. It could be challenging.
Could be.
And then there's a lot of people out there like, how can I help the Republicans lose in 2022? I would think it would be tempting for them to go out and seed this narrative.
I've been stabbed in the back.
I mean, it really, in many respects, he has. There's a lot of people who are, but I'm glad I don't have to deal with that world.
And Brad, we just want the truth. It's simple.
This smells so much like Roger Stone to me, as being some sort of like liaison between being the dirty trickster. I mean, didn't she the testimony also say that Trump spoke to him and Flynn before the day before the Capitol attack? I could totally see.
And like the whole Willard Hotel war room thing he was involved with.
Yeah. No, he was sitting there. There's no doubt in my mind there was a command and control center for the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, and that
Roger
Stone was sitting there.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. So.
It's Stone's entire project of his political life is just like screwing shit like this, like with Watergate.
It reeks of Stone. It reeks of him.
Now, Hutchinson had also said, and we don't need to play this clip, but Hutchinson had also told this story about Trump lunging for the car, and I think that that is it shows his state of mind that he wanted to go to the Capitol. It's impossible to determine why, although, he was talking to like Putin the days before, like. And if this were to play out in, let's just say for a moment, if this were to play out in a Latin American country where very often the United States would be playing the role of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, essentially, and there was an overthrow of the government or, a soft coup. Presence is key, right? Like, that's why they fly these leaders out to get them out in exile if they want them. And presence is so key in these instances.
Well, look at Zelensky, all the selfies and stuff during the invasion. Right?
Exactly. And I get the sense that somebody was advising Trump that you want to be there.
Yep.
In some fashion. Does this guy really want to be at the, what's the instinct to be at the Capitol?
Because before this, I would have assumed that, he wanted to just watch on television, it all going down.
No, he wanted to lead the charge and basically storm in there with Jim Jordan at his back and Mike Pence being pressured into helping him out.
Or was he there to influence Pence or to calm things in person?
Calm things?
Well, I think if he could come in and basically say I know we gotta do the electors thing, but I need everybody to chill now. The process is working. I don't know, but
I don't know how that squares with him basically saying don't search people for weaponry anymore.
Well, I don't know that he wanted to be in the front. He might have wanted to be in the back.
Oh, he's definitely Joffrey, in season 2,
exactly.
the Battle of Blackwater Bay, where he goes and hides with his mom instead of leading the troops. That's true.
Supposedly the two Secret Service people together are denying that they told her this, and it's interesting. We will see what happens with that thing.
I remember. Dan Bongino was a Secret Service agent, so picking the best.
Look, the one thing that you're supposed to do as a Secret Serviceman, there's two things, right? Protect the president at all costs. And the extension of that is not just physical. We never heard about the affairs that JFK was having. They don't want to have the reputation within the Secret Service of
divulging secrets.
And if there's only two people in the car, and they both have been accused of divulging secrets, and then they can decide oh no, we didn't divulge any secret. That's a lie. That never happened. She's making it up. I don't know.
Also, they're kind of like cops, so that's why.
What clip is that? 6. Okay. So here is, now they had this testimony, I think, again, is sinew. It allows us to, it raises questions as much as it answers things. And because a lot of her stuff is hearsay, or it's it's just, I heard the words Oath Keepers and Proud Boys in the White House, in the, outside with Rudy Giuliani, who's there in the wing that I'm in. She's right there with the president and the chief of staff. And so we don't have any of the details. It's almost like the metadata. But you need the metadata to establish that maybe the data, what the data is ultimately. And so they're trying to discount what she's saying. And I think it's really sort of this is not we are not at peak information. We are at, this is the container that's going to provide us the information. That's my guess anyways. But here's Martha McCallum just basically saying a lot of nothing going on.
Absolutely. I'm not sure that it really shocks anybody that the president, just, knowing what we've seen, observing him over the years, if he got angry that he might throw his lunch. I'm not sure. It's obviously a very dramatic detail, and the way that she describes it is. But I'm not sure that any of this is wholly out of character with the Donald Trump and the President Trump that people came to know over the years. And there's a lot of people out there who obviously shared his feelings of frustration over the course of those days. The problem was that they couldn't back it up with anything in the courts, and they couldn't back it up with evidence that they produced. And that obviously was probably a source of deep frustration as well. Things were clearly not going his way. All of this is revelatory in terms of character and action, and for people to take in and do with that information what they will over the course of time. As I said, whether or not the DOJ has more to go on here based on this testimony, I'll leave that to Jonathan Turley and others.
Oh God, Jonathan Turley. But the focusing on the catch-up and focusing on the steering wheel, I think hide and obscure the most important details. Oath Keepers, Proud Boys mentioned in the White House multiple occasions via Rudy Giuliani, and the fact that Donald Trump was aware that there were weapons, was convinced that they were not there for him. I mean,
Meadows taking private phone calls, repeatedly shutting the door as his aide is trying to inform him that there is violence on the Capitol.
Those are the things that I think are really, really important. I mean, can you imagine being president of the United States and being like, let the people in with the weapons? What?
Let them in. Let them in with the AKs.
Literally, apparently there were AR-15s.
I don't doubt it.
I just find it extraordinary.
It's also like Martha McCollum there collapsing Trump's frustration that they're not going to defraud an election for him with millions of people around the country who also have questions because your network can't be clear about it.
Well, it's on purpose. They're the idea that they're obviously trying to focus on the smaller details here, but this is supposed to be the news section of Fox News, the one that's less opinion-based, by the way. And they're hiding everything that's important.
I threw my nothing burger all over the wall, and they're still wiping the ketchup off.
Let's go to some phone calls. Calling from a 607 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. This is Tim calling from Rochester, New York.
Tim from Rochester, New York. What is on your mind, Tim?
I wanted to speak to the Supreme Court decision on school prayer, or on the prayer on the football field.
Yeah.
I've been a football coach for the last 5 years now. I actually just moved from rural Pennsylvania. There I was a defensive coordinator. I just actually moved out of the state for a new job up here. But just to provide some context on how intense football is in PA, prayer was built into our pregame. It was something that we did routinely. And interestingly enough, it was the Lord's Prayer.
Which Lord's Prayer is that? You have to help me out here. I'm a little bit rusty on my Lord's prayers.
Our Father throughout in heaven, that whole thing.
Okay.
Yes. I identify as an agnostic, but in any case, this was something that was incredibly routine in high school football locker rooms. It was also something, I played college football. We did it there as well, and it's always sort of implicit, right? As you guys kind of talked earlier in the show. I just want to also speak to the idea that kids at this age are incredibly emotional and vulnerable, and football programs sell destiny, and they sell the idea that this is what you're supposed to be doing. And to have something a part of a routine, makes kids so incredibly susceptible to joining into that sort of thing. And also, just as a quick final note, and then I'll let you guys comment, the idea in this case was that this coach, after the last whistle is blown, he's sort of free to do whatever he wants, right? That's so not true. Anybody that's involved in high school athletics knows that these coaches are responsible for making sure those kids get home safely. Whether their parents are picking them up or whatever else, you have to take down the field. You have to talk to parents. You have to do so many different things, make sure the kids get home safely. Oftentimes coaches would take turns. Hey, I'll wait the extra hour it might take for their parents to come pick them up. So you are not in any way, shape, or form off duty.
Right.
And, obviously this is incredibly concerning with the gun culture and the way that pensions are looking in states like Pennsylvania. It's actually a part of the reason why I left to come to New York. So In any case, I love the show. Keep up the great work, guys. We're very lucky to have intelligent people on the left using their voices the way that you guys do. So please keep up the great work.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, none of that shocks me. The football, that's the same reason that college football is such an exploitative system in and of itself, because of that very same selling point of destiny, of purpose. They dangle the kinds of, futures where you're a millionaire, where you're a big shot over kids' heads in order to get them to accept zero pay and not push towards like a stronger, there needs to be college football players unions that are pushing for base pay, not just these NIL deals that benefit star players. Yeah, I mean, and let alone the fact that the coach, your football coach, as they sell you that destiny and as they sell you your future, are responsible for your entire future. You won't see the field if you piss off the coach. You've got to suck up, as I mentioned earlier, judge, jury, and executioner. And so the idea that it's just some sort of individual religious act, it's actually the antithesis of an individual religious act, because you are compelling the players to worship with you and worship you.
Yeah, it's like incredibly manipulative and a common tactic. Like Dabo Swinney, who's the coach of the Clemson football team, is an evangelical Christian, and a lot of the rhetoric he couches when being against college players being paid is that there's some sort of like divinity and more like higher calling when they're not being paid, and he just so happens to be the highest paid state employee in South Carolina.
It's odd. That might cut into his salary. I mean, Tim Tebow prayed with frickin' Urban Meyer, who... Sorry, really quick, Sam. He reminded me, like, you're supposed to stay after and meet with the parents of the team. Urban Meyer flew away after his team lost and grinded it up on some girl at a bar. But I digress.
And we should also say the damage is it's one thing when the coaches are doing this right before the game, saying the Lord's Prayer, and then going out there and doing it, and people are like, I got to do this if they don't want to. But it becomes a completely different thing when it becomes sanctioned, because the ability for a student in that instance to go like, coach is effed up, he shouldn't be doing this, but I'm doing it because I'm making a calculation that people make throughout their lives at different times. I'm going along with something that I know is wrong because the damage is not that great and the wrong is not that problematic, and I want to play football, and I'm forced to do that, and it's wrong that that's happening. But it's a totally different thing where it's sanctioned, where you're like, I have no option here. What he's doing is A-okay with everybody, including society, including this, and this is then all of a sudden it's not just a rogue football coach who's doing this. It is the entire apparatus of the state saying, if you want to participate in society, it is perfectly fine that you have to pay your admission fee is pay fealty to that guy's God. And we're going to get a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of that. Let's turn for a moment, though, to the implications, again, of abortion, and this the abortion ruling. And we're going to hear a lot more of this, obviously. And as it stands now, we have 33%, only 33% of the country supports that ruling. There's a story from Dayton. And be prepared for this, because you're going to hear a lot of this. And people say that this abortion ruling is going to cost women's lives. It's not going to cost women's lives because they're going to be getting dangerous abortions. More often than not, that's going to be to the extent that people are going to have illicit abortions in states that ban them, it is going to be a function of medicine. They're going to get pills that are going to provide their abortion in many instances.
And those pills are very, very safe, although there could be some complications, and this would naturally chill them from going to a provider to seek help
Without
for
a
any
doubt.
complications.
But in many respects, the level of complications in these instances generally is, along the lines of taking of Tylenol. But here is an example of what you're going to see. Go to the top of this. The parking lot of a Dayton Women's Medical Center in Kettering was busier than usual Monday as patients inside tried to understand their options now that abortions are banned in Ohio after the detection of a fetal heartbeat about 6 weeks into pregnancy. Let's be clear. This is not a fetal heartbeat. It is an auditory representation of electrical impulses that are going there. You can hear with a stethoscope your heartbeat. You cannot hear with a stethoscope the fetus's heartbeat at 6 weeks. Today, we saw a patient in Dayton, says a representative from Women's Med, who has cancer. Her doctors told her she would have to terminate before she received chemotherapy treatment. Well, she can't do that. It's illegal in Ohio now. There are many women who are 15 weeks out, 20 weeks out. She will have to travel to Indiana. A mom brought her daughter in and doesn't own a car. She'll have to rent one to get her daughter to her appointment in Indianapolis later this week. There's going to be women who die because they don't get their chemotherapy in time, because they are pregnant and cannot get chemotherapy until they end their pregnancy. There are going to be women who die because they have ectopic pregnancy ruptures. There are going to be women who die because they have a miscarriage that doesn't fully evacuate. There are going to be women who die because just maybe suicide, and that they can't care for a child, or they don't know where to turn.
Can be women who die. Pregnant women are but at the hands of their partners, number one murder victims.
I mean,
they might die after they have the child that they were forced into having because the man saw having a child with this woman as a method of control and keeping her in the relationship, and then she could die from the continued domestic violence.
And again, exceptions. I mean, it's not hard to imagine that, you're a 14-year-old victim of incest, and what that would do to you and your mental health. But there are going to be women who die, again, with the exception of the life of the mother. Doctors make an assessment, 20% danger, 30%. And the counter incentive is, I don't want to go to jail. That's what's going to happen. And we're going to see more and more of that. Here is a good clip on CNN of just, and here's the thing that I think the Democratic leadership does not quite understand. Okay. And that is, and Atrios brought this up on his blog at Eschaton. He was talking about, I don't know if I have it here. He was talking about the Terry Schiavo case. I don't know if folks remember this.
That's probably the first big news story and debate that I remember.
It was in, I think, 2005, maybe 6.
Yeah.
And there was a woman who was in a vegetative state. I think it was in Florida. And her husband had had multiple discussions with her in the past. They had talked about this. If I'm ever in a vegetative state, I want you to essentially pull the plug on me. The parents did not want this for their daughter. By every law, common law, the husband had the power to make this decision. the Florida courts, I think it was, it became a huge debate, and I think the hospital wasn't doing it. I can't remember exactly the sequencing of everything. And the Republicans got involved in this. You literally had Bill Frist, who was the Senate Majority Leader at the time, arguing that he thinks that she can come out of it.
Well, there was a whole right-wing propaganda operation that, frankly, it took advantage of her parents' grief, and they had that whole documentary that came out showing her eyes moving to certain responses to prove that it's possible that she comes out of it, which wasn't the case.
And the bottom line is, the question was, who had the power or the right to decide what happens to Terry Schiavo? Again, Congress jumps in, and at the end, as soon as Congress jumps in, I'll read from Atros. Congress steps in, Tom DeLay stepped in, and everyone all over the country could imagine the bug man, Tom DeLay was a former pest control guy, interfering in their lives at the worst, most difficult moments. It's one thing to disapprove of Michael Schiavo, the husband who wanted to essentially pull the plug. Quite another to imagine your medical and end-of-life decisions being hijacked by the freaks in Congress after the normal, which was hardly normal, process had played out. This was there was a long, protracted legal process in Florida. Plenty of people disapprove of abortion in general sense, but not as many really want the reality of a post-Roe world. Horror stories will be there daily. We just read you one. If anyone chooses to report on them, and one political party had better get out in front of it. This is an opportunity for the Democrats to not cower away from this and wait for these stories to get out there and hopefully move. Public opinion is already there, and it's hypothetical. But in the days and weeks and months and years to come, we're going to hear story after story of women dying because of this. Maybe we'll read longer features on women whose career trajectory or life trajectories completely were inhibited because they didn't have the right to control the decision about whether they will have a child. This is a good example of what we're going to hear. He's focusing on the exceptions again because the polling shows there. But again, they can go further.
Provide abortions without consent of parents. Could you imagine having a teenage daughter who needed to have an abortion and the parents didn't have consent?
I could if that daughter was the victim of a rape or incest, in which case your party will allow, not just allow, force that 13-year-old girl to carry her rapist child to her pregnancy to term. I want to just clarify one thing. And I think the vice president said it well. The only difference between Clarence Thomas and the rest of the court is that Clarence Thomas said out loud, and Mike Pence has said out loud, what many Republicans, like Alice, will not say. They want a national ban. If they really believe that what is happening is murder, it is inconsistent for you to say a national ban is not the next step. And Republicans care about life until the child is born.
No, here's the question.
And that's where they drop off.
Here's the question. Now, I want to ask this. Well, since
it's just this final statement because
I think it's important. The other option is what Democrats want. Democrats are fine with abortion up to delivery. That's unfathomable. That they certainly are. That is absolutely on the table for Democrats.
How many cases of a woman having an abortion at delivery do you know of that have been reported?
Okay, I want to ask you.
How many? Just give me a number.
Democrats are fine with that, though. But
this is a stalking horse of the Republican Party. Instead of giving women the rights, you want to give Mike Pence and Clarence Thomas the rights over a majority of American women.
See, the point is that the right has been able to create these sort of fake hypotheticals. And yes, it is wrong to abort a baby after it's been born. And Democrats want to do this.
They do this all the time, by the way. Torture's okay because we all live in 24 and there's a ticking time bomb and you get to torture somebody in order to stop a terrorist attack. Would you do it?
the dynamic is going to shift dramatically now, because they're not going to be able to say the idea of Democrats would have you abort your baby at 9 months. That is not going to carry the same weight when it is compared to women who have died because they've been denied health care. That is not going to carry the same weight when these bans are all actually implemented and we start to hear the horror stories. Democrats should get out in front of this, should make it clear, and they can be shown, essentially like this is the future that's coming. And that future is not going to take long to get here.
The future's now. You see reports from nurses and from doctors saying that they're terrified to deal with ectopic pregnancies and all these other medical issues because they could be prosecuted. They could be fined hundreds of thousands of dollars in certain states. I mean, the effect is already happening. And Democrats should seize this opportunity. I have yet to see any Democrat, except for, frankly, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been aggressive in proposing solutions and has been out there. But besides her, the whole Biden administration is expressing chagrin and sadness about the decision that we all knew was coming, but that in 2017, Nancy Pelosi said was no longer really a pressing issue for Democrats electorally. Look it up. We all could see it was coming with the Trump administration and the extremists that he was appointing to the court, but yet they're completely ill-prepared. And there are a variety of things that Biden could try to do right now, like putting abortion clinics and providers on federal lands, which Kamala Harris says they aren't even considering at this point. So what is the response? And this is the issue with popularism as connected to the Democratic agenda, because it doesn't matter how popular anything is. Universal background checks, 90% popularity. Abortion rights, incredibly popular in this country. And if they don't seize the power to do it, it doesn't really matter what's popular because they don't choose to do anything about it.
This is, I want to show an example of a tweet by someone who has had real estate on the one of the most important newspapers.
He's the youngest op-ed columnist in the history of the New York Times.
And he's been there for a decade?
A long time. As long as I've been reading.
And this gives you a sense of sort of like how the attempt to sort of justify abortion bans beyond the fact that it's just God's will. Go show the full tweet first, and then we'll get to the other thing. So this is Dothout, Ross Dothout, or maybe I'm mispronouncing his name. I don't care. And he talks about taped the argument earlier today. The argument, I guess, is his podcast. Fumbled through some closing remarks. This from it's Michael B. Is it Donahue? Michael Donahue?
Michael Brendan Doherty.
Michael Doherty, yeah. Right. And does he still write? Who does he write for?
The National Review.
Oh, National Review. Okay. And he is also a fundamentalist Catholic. I think Dothout is as well. And I want you to read this. And it is one of I was going to tweet about this, but it is so mind-numbingly childish and unsophisticated and able to be attacked. Like, I've never seen a statement that is flawed in its reasoning in such a 360-degree manner.
Yeah, whatever your ideology is.
And exactly, it's fascinating. This is what he writes. Pro-choice activists like to point out that you probably know people who have had abortions. And this is undoubtedly true. If you are 30 years or older, I would hazard a guess the number of 30-year-olds in this country who know someone who do not know anybody who has had an abortion, who've never met anybody who has an abortion, it's probably near zero. You may not know it.
Everyone's friends with these murderers.
Pro-choice activists like to point out that you probably know people who have had abortions. They are your sisters, aunts, neighbors. That's true, and it definitely is true. But Rose End has other ramifications as well. If normal people have a social circle of 150 meaningful contacts. They link to something. All right, let's stipulate. 500 acquaintances and about 1,500 people they can at least recognize. Then in a few short years, every American will know, recognize, and interact with a young person who was saved from abortion by last week's ruling. You won't know who they are. In most cases, they won't know who they are. I would say all of those cases probably, but they'll be there. In 25 years, they will be studied throughout your life, going to college, working, jobs all around you. They'll be your kids' friends and teammates. Someday, maybe their spouses. They may be assisting you in your old age home. That's the future that is certainly coming into being. That's a legacy worth celebrating. Okay, let's talk about the many ways in which this is one of the most juvenile statements you could make. This is undoubtedly true. If you prohibit people from having abortions, there'll be more people alive who would have otherwise been aborted. And they may be assisting you in your old age home. They may be your friends. They may also kill you. They may also grow up to be
Republicans.
But they may grow up to be really detrimental. They may grow up to people who they are a drunk drive and they kill your family. They may be just like the existence of all other people. There will be nothing in any way distinct from people who have not been aborted. They may, in fact, since you only have 150 meaningful contacts, because that apparently is what a normal person can handle, they may be wasting your time in your life and inhibiting your ability to find your soulmate. They may be someone who says like, hey, I need your help this weekend. And you're like, oh, should I have gone to that barbecue? No, I'll go help them. I mean, I know this sounds ridiculous, but it sounds exactly what like this person has written. And you'll never meet your soulmate. Or maybe like, hey, come with me to this concert. Don't go to that job fair. And you missed the job that could have made you, wildly successful. Or maybe they'll steal your future. Maybe you would have discovered a new computer thing, but that dude did, or whatever. Now that's just on their terms. But then there's another side of which shows how stupid this is. Like every time any individual decides to practice the use of contraception, you could be denying somebody.
It could be Mother Teresa.
You could, you should never use any type of protection.
No.
At any point, because
in fact, you should never masturbate.
You should, and that's right, because who knows?
Missed opportunities there.
No fap, because that could be Gandhi.
No fap forever.
Exactly. You don't know what semen, you could be spilling the golden ticket, as it were, for society. I mean, this is so stupid. And so that's two different angles. Here's a third angle. What about the women who will die? And we know there will be women who die because of this abortion ban. And we know that many women get an abortion and then later have children when they're ready to have children. So we're also missing out not only on what those women could have achieved in their lives.
They can't achieve anything.
To the extent that we can expect women to achieve anything, but their potential offspring. We're also missing out on what they could have done. And in fact, maybe that kid that woman would have had would have been the one who's taking care of me in the old age home. This is just one of the most juvenile thoughts. And to think that it's profound and eloquent and put out by people who control this much of the intellectual discourse is shocking.
But good thing they're the people that showed the most concern for the increase in orphans during the COVID-19 pandemic, or the hundreds of thousands of children that are without parents in foster care right now. Good thing those are the same people, right?
We also know that 50% of abortions are sought by women living under the poverty line. And so what we also know is that those kids in 25 years, they'll be going to college and working jobs all around you. They will also be stuck in a cycle of poverty that exists in this country. There is every reason to believe that if you have someone who is in poverty now and they are forced to have more children, that they're going to, the likelihood of their ability to escape poverty becomes minimized.
That would have been helped by the child tax credit. This is the same party that's in favor of that, right?
Well,
that lifted millions of children out of poverty?
No.
Right. I am as angry and as furious. I mean, I was on a plane when we got the ruling on Friday, and I got into a variety of different debates with male family members who were like, "Well, I have faith. I have faith that
no pun intended.
Oh, I have faith that because the tide of history bends toward and most people, but that's not how power works."
The bedtime story generation.
It is. Yeah. Well.
I mean, just some stats. This is from 2021. A new study found that pregnant women in the U.S. are twice as likely to die by homicide than pregnancy-related causes. We just allowed handguns, basically, free run for handguns. So we're doing that at the exact same time we're banning abortion. What's happening is men are deciding, I'd rather be a murderer than a father, and that's going to happen at increasing rates now. So other people we won't know in Ross Douthat's thought experiment are the women who are going to be murdered.
Yeah, and to the point is just that, as angry and upset as I am about the theocrats and the conservatives, we've always known that this is who they are, and we've been talking about this for decades and decades. And I'm infuriated that the Democrats have zero plan to beat this back.
Yep.
Zero. It's always just that our institutions are too powerful, and the confines of them are too powerful for us to do anything. And even when there is something possible within the confines of our institution, I'm too afraid of the potential blowback to do anything about it, because abortion is icky. And that is the same reason why I have issues with, even though that in the clip we played a little while ago, that was effective in that context, but for the most part, emphasizing exceptions for rape and incest as a way to highlight the brutality of the Republican Party, because it does not need to be an exception for a woman to seek an abortion. It is a medical procedure, and it is her decision. It's her choice. And so it needs to be normalized, as opposed to be seen as something that can be done in the shadows only when a woman is the victim of something so horrible as rape or incest. No, it should be widely available to that degree.
And I think we're running into a problem here with our medical system, because you're going to extend a right to one medical procedure, but not rights to other ones. I think, you look at the
Carl Behar wrote about this.
Yeah, I think I saw that. The fundamental sort of symmetry or whatever between the trans debate, the abortion stuff, and just healthcare in general, is the fundamental thing that's similar in all those is do not trust people to get their own healthcare and be empowered to seek their own health choices. And that's what we're running into. Other countries where they have national health systems, they say abortion is just covered by that. We have this whole Hyde Amendment, bingo bango. We're playing from behind so bad here.
Sam's least favorite apple cultivar on the IM says nobody has the right to use someone else's body as a resource. Right? That's what they're arguing here. That we need you women to be vessels to produce the people who are going to work in the healthcare facilities, and the people who are going to go to college and working jobs and be your kids' friends. You exist to be vessels to produce these humans. And Sam's least favorite apple cultivar says nobody has a right to use someone else's body as a resource. People die every year because they need a kidney, but the state cannot force kidney donations. All you need is one, folks. abortion is no different. Even if you grant that the fetus is a person, which it isn't.
Yeah. Exactly. And dang, what was the first point made? The first I am
using somebody else's body as a resource.
Yeah. They are going to, mark my words. One, doctors are already terrified about giving health care for ectopic pregnancies and other complications, which is an abortion. But what they're going to do is if you have a miscarriage, if you are a woman who's poor and they deem that you were not the perfect earthen vessel for that child, they are going to prosecute women. Not only are they going to go after you for abortions, but they're going to go after you if you have a miscarriage because your womb was not sufficiently hostile. That is going to happen. That's going to happen 100%.
All right, folks, we don't have time for any more phone calls. I apologize. We have people hanging on for about an hour, and I'm sorry. I told you up front, very little calls. I said that, right?
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sorry. Just one more point about that CNN clip. They're so full of it about not doing a federal ban on abortion. Like, they've been saying for years. Here's here. I'm going to get pissed. Susan Collins saying, oh, he lied to me. Kavanaugh lied to me. He said he wasn't going to overturn Roe v. Wade, and he did, right? They're doing the same thing now. They're lying and pretending that they're not going to put a federal ban in place when that's exactly their goal. And, there's still people like, okay, well, at least you can go to New York and safe haven. No, this is the end result. And I'm terrified personally, in 2 years, if that's going to happen. I mean, and why? It's just, how does this happen right now? Roe v. Wade get overturned, and the impulse is still, let's not then take these crazy people seriously. They don't mean what they say. Of course that's what they mean.
Yep.
Of course that's what they want to do.
And also
they're fascists.
And also just the credulousness of I was just seeing Jeffrey Goldberg quote tweeting an article in The Atlantic by Elaine Godfrey being now potentially that they've gotten what they want, maybe there will be a more robust social welfare state pushed forward by pro-life activists.
Oh my God.
And Douthit saying the same thing. And I'm I said this in a similar thing about it regarding something Kamala said on Twitter, but I was don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. There is not 50 years have gone by, and I don't remember a single anti-abortion activist
piss
being
down my back and tell me it's raining.
That was me. I'm just saying, don't say something that it has 50 years of precedence the other way. Like Phyllis Schlafly or whoever was not saying, "Oh, we're going to expand Medicaid once we get abortion Roe v. Wade overturned."
So insane to even the idea that an editor would even be
profound, Elaine.
Seriously, are you gonna?
But their desire to believe that Republicans are not who they are is so overwhelming. It is the driving principle of that kind of thinker. And the same thing with this joker, Ross Douche Hat. That is exactly what how they perceive. They want to view the world in that lens so badly that it doesn't matter how many facts they get in front of them.
I want to play this clip 11 because all this stuff is of a whole. Texas, I guess it was in 2004 at the RNC. In the RNC 2004, I interviewed and almost got ejected, surrounded by Secret Service people. At the RNC, the Republican National Convention, I interviewed after looking on the floor for a log cabin or a gay Republican. I found one, California. It was fascinating how people would call me over and go, "I think there's one in California," and head over there. In fact, maybe we'll play that clip, another day, but it's out there. And I interviewed this guy, and I just recently looked at it. He was a guy who I suspect was in his 60s. And I'm like, how can you stay in this party when they are treating you like a second-class citizen? I mean, George Bush had gone in front of the nation at prime time and said, we want to put a anti-gay marriage amendment in the Constitution. And he said, if I leave, who will be there to fix it for me? And I'm like, I don't understand how you can do this. Well, I imagine that guy felt vindicated on some level for a couple of years. If he was still around in 2013 when the Supreme Court went there, and then it became less of an issue for Republicans. But there was also a lot of people who said this can go backwards. And we have just seen in the reversal of Roe v. Wade an individual right that has existed in this country for over 50 years, or about 50 years, go backwards, get completely undone. Here is a audio from the Texas Republican Platform Committee. And this guy thought, oh, well, the Republican Party has turned the corner. I get some very, very bad news from you. I will tell you this. There was a representative from California. I think his name was Dreyer or something. I don't think it was Dreyer. I can't remember who it was now. And there were people who say, like, other Republican Congress people at that time would not shake his hand because they didn't want to catch it. What's old is new again in the Republican Party. Here is a gay Republican coming to the realization that his buddies on this platform committee may not be as open as he thought they were.
The other things that we talk about here. So that's why I'm putting it in. Anybody want to speak against? Mr. Vaughn?
I know you're all surprised, right? Look, I have not spoken against any other of these planks on homosexuality.
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second. This guy is responding to the fact that the guy who just spoke prior to him put into the platform, homosexuality is an abnormal lifestyle choice. Incidentally, it's 2022. This is not from 1981.
Right. Look, I have not spoken against any other of these planks on homosexuality. A lot of these things have been agreed to with Texas Values and others coming to a long conversation on these things. We don't just call, look, abnormal, yes, by scientific, mathematical definition, you are correct. And then we can put in Vietnamese Americans, because they're a very small percentage of America, are abnormal. This is meant to be insulting language. It's not. It does nothing for policy. It does nothing to move us forward. And honestly, it's a little insulting to drop this on this body right after you say we don't have a lot of time to discuss other planks. This is, I'm sorry, but we have gone through this. If you wanted to do this yesterday, we had more time to discuss. That's fine, but dropping this on this committee right now after these things have been so hard fought, after honestly something I deeply disagree with, I've ignored, I've allowed through, not been part of this at all, and then to come through this, it's harmful, it's hurting. I was called a pedophile outside. Somebody screamed pedophile at me because I'm a gay man. I'm a member of this committee. I was unanimous. I'm sorry, I shouldn't get this emotional. I'm a member of this committee. I have been committed to this party. I have walked every weekend. These sorts of insults, I get it. We're against gay marriage. That's fine. I get that we're not there. That's okay. Personal insults, movements like this, should be beyond the pale of this party. It does nothing for love. It does nothing for policy. It does nothing for the gospel. It does nothing to move us forward as a party and gain voters. There are people screaming at people outside. There are people that are consistently harming and insulting people. I have never been treated like that at this party before. And we shouldn't be surprising people with this.
Surprise, surprise.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking.
You lay in bed with a tiger and it clawed your face. I'm just so shocked.
What do they say? The scorpion biting party?
Yeah.
I just found out that the scorpion.
It also
the tiger eat my face party. Yeah.
It reminds me a tiny bit of and I mean, it's still a little. Obviously, this guy's alive, so it's a little different. Of those middle tier radio hosts dying of COVID because they weren't getting vaccinated, where they were like, "Oh wait, you guys aren't getting back. You guys are actually getting vaccinated. I actually didn't get vaccinated. Then they die. It's like this man has clearly devoted his life to the Republican Party, and they still don't care. It's actually not enough for him to be committed to the party.
No.
It literally does not matter.
No, it does not. It does not.
Yeah, but in fact, it undercuts like anything that he's trying to. Right. That's why you can't be in bed. You can't be in bed with the.
I've served your ends for all my life, and yet you still don't give a shit about me, man.
Hey, but Peter Thiel spoke at the convention, so.
All right, we'll do some IMs. We got to get out of here. Missouri misery. Dangling the student loan forgiveness and the break in repayment has led to a constant state of anxiety in the back of my head since Biden has been in power. I hate this administration daily because of it. Love you all. Left is best.
Yep.
David from Sweden. As a Swede and a NATO opponent, today is a horrible day. Our SOC-Dem government has applied to join NATO after a completely sham process, even though we still have a majority of the people opposing joining NATO. Since Turkey has used their veto, we are now apparently giving in to extraditing Kurdish terrorists and abandoning our principles to join NATO in a rush. The right is trying to get to power by allying with neo-Nazi party. The only thing most politicians want to focus on seem to be blaming the Green Party for the climate issue. We have our election in September, and I feel full-on panic. Expansion of NATO, I don't see the value in it. I can understand why it has more momentum now. You've got Russia bombing civilians. I still don't think that it is necessary, but it is hard to imagine that Putin wouldn't have contemplated this is the obvious outcome. But yeah, it's at least the insanity is not just a function of within the U.S. borders. Tack thumb, I know that's no consolation for you in Sweden, but welcome to it. Tack thumb, my family did foster care when I was growing up. I have seen what happens to kids whose parents don't want them. The Supreme Court has committed an act of unspeakable violence.
Not to mention all the "we will adopt your baby" freaks that are going out
exactly
and not adopting, 5-year-olds.
I wonder if there's some sort of racial bias in terms of what kinds of babies get adopted by those folks.
The important thing is there's a good selection on the market.
Emma in the shadows. Sam, it was truly amazing hearing you and your son interact yesterday. That little glimpse into your personal life shows how great a father you are. Yo, can you hear? Yeah. A little word of advice, though. Please feed Saul at least 30 minutes before dropping the kids off at the pool. Do you know what that means? Well, I'll explain afterwards. Houston mailman. For those of us who are seeking reproductive health care through the mail in states where abortion is now or will be banned, make sure you do it through the U.S. Postal Service. State and local governments have zero jurisdiction over us. They cannot search U.S. Postal Service vehicles, sorting facilities, your personal mailbox, etc. Good point, folks.
Yep.
Good point.
I want people to be. I've been using a period app on my phone. Just look into some of the user data. What do you call terms of service and things like that, especially if you're in a state that has made abortion illegal.
Eli from Jersey. Fun fact, the Majority Report story is based directly off the plot of The Lion King. Yesterday was a great homage to the Everything the Light Touches scene, and we can look forward to Emma usurping Sam, Saul being raised by Matt and Bradley, and growing up to take back the kingdom. Oh, and I guess Brandon and Binder are the jackals or whatever.
Yeah,
Wait,
so
so
I guess we're Timon and Pumbaa, me and Matt. I've gotten a Pumbaa comparison before in my life.
That's really rude.
It's okay. It's fine. It's true.
Wait, but then who am I?
Nala?
I'm Nala.
But maybe that's not right.
No.
That seems inappropriate.
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
think so.
God. Dude guy pal. Emma interviewing Saul about Sam when?
Saul, you want me to interview you? Not right now. Eventually?
Stalling.
Maybe. Okay.
Emma, I don't blame you for leaving the left for a grifter fame and fortune. Just yesterday, Sam did a trial run of a new, younger, funnier co-host. I've had a boss try to replace me before, so I can sympathize.
Who came up? Oh, Saul.
My name is Liz, not Lynn. Sam is a little snippy today. Yes, he is.
You usually get over it by the end of the show, though.
Andrew from D.C. Are we just going to pretend the GOP won't take the legislature, abolish the filibuster, vote in whatever way they want? when they're about to lose power, reestablish filibuster. They've basically done this in state legislatures where the governorship is changing parties. Without a doubt, we've seen it modeled there, right? We saw it in Wisconsin. I think we saw it in North Carolina. Brainwashed lady. The Catholic school I went to accepted anyone, though there was a hefty tuition to pay. Students who weren't Catholic could opt out of religion classes and didn't take communion when we went to Mass. My chemistry teacher was a creationist and had us read from the Bible before each class. We were told that socialism was bad because the church says so. Otherwise, I had a handful of very good teachers who weren't paid nearly enough.
My experience with Bismarck, Mandan area schools is that St. Mary's, the Catholic school, was also the whitest school.
Justin, this hot take brought to you by Sam Seems Bad Seder. I'm not sure what that reference to. Soft Cactus. The Supreme Court read Marie Kondo's book and is applying it to all constitutional rights.
That's the organizing thing? No.
Nick in Japan. My mom keeps telling me she's not watching the hearing so she can stay neutral and sending me all kinds of whack job Trumpist tweets and blogs about why the hearings are fake news. It is just, man, we are. Sonic Boom. When Emma successfully accomplishes her full takeover of the show, I hope she chooses to make Saul her full-time co-host. The show could really benefit from having his sense of humor. Shadow Band. So Breyer's retiring tomorrow. Oh, yeah, that was announced. Obvious that he would do it at the end of the thing. KBJ will be sworn in. What determines this process? Would it be possible for Biden to have confirmed justices in the case of a potential future vacancy? Could he have a couple lined up in case he loses re-election?
We did talk about this briefly with Wilfred Codrington, like in March. I don't think it's like statutorily possible, but
I think that's the thing that is unclear to me.
Yeah.
Like, I think when a new Senate takes office, they could nullify the confirmation, I imagine, and then reconfirm somebody else. But stacking up the confirmations now, I'm not sure why you wouldn't do that. In the event that, like,
it's Biden,
you lose. Well, I mean, I imagine somebody must have floated it, and there's some rule, but I mean, just imagine it's just a rule.
Who did we ask about that too? Because
it was Wilfred Codrington. He's a Brooklyn Law School professor.
he said he liked where your head was at, but I don't think that he knew of any precedent.
Yeah, it's unclear. Tojo's bald head, higher the helmet, closer to Jesus. All right, 5 more. J.B. Davis, Biden should give Miss Hutchinson the Medal of Freedom. I would slow down. Alexis 485. Ross Dathout never had anyone to tell him to shut up when he was 19 and offering a masturbatory diatribe in a college dorm room. Just blown away how quickly a divided government could act to shore up the financial system in 2008 beyond any kind of jurisdiction or precedence, and how we are so remarkably hamstrung now with Roe. The only constituency of the Ross Dathout platform is Ross Dathout. Davey 9000. Hey, I'm our crew. Not sure if you heard about the Howard Stern contemplating a run for presidency in the aftermath of Roe. He just wants to pack the Supreme Court in light of the general Democratic insouciance. It's a compelling pitch. Any thoughts?
I mean,
if it pushes somebody else to do it.
Yeah. I don't really have any thoughts beyond that's a good idea.
Demian. Mother Teresa was a monster. The world would have been better without that sadist.
It was just a figure of I was just, yeah, right.
Murray Rothbard would freaking love this world. 2 more. Ad hominem. I don't know about anyone else, but I'd rather be aborted than raised by a 13-year-old victim of rape or whatever. I liked having parents who were prepared a nice life for me to enter. Political Jill. That's how fascism does it. And the final I am of the day. Let me get on that. Oh. Darth Saul. Hutchinson still wanted to work for Trump after everything that happened on January 6th, so no medal for her, sadly. Emma will be here tomorrow. Matt, Bradley, Emma, guy in studio. Saul, great job today. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,